walk with me if you will. Help me determine when were the days of unleavened bread. It was around the same time that King Herod took this Peter, took him into custody. He was the people's hero. Say Herod.
Herod.
Herod means heroic. He was the people's hero. And I found this out in business meetings. We're talking about pastor and church, right?
Yeah.
I found this out about pastoring and churches. I found out that some church meetings have heroes.
Yeah.
All right. Who showed out this time in Gallatin? Where's the talking about? Churches have heroes. They may not pay the most money, but they can raise the most hell. Like heroes. And the don't leave me alone. Listen, they were there after the custom and tradition of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They were there because, listen what Herod did. He saw that he could please the people because it was a big crowd.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody was in town, and so everybody was saying, well, you know, Peter is cutting up because he's believing in that Christ person. Peter is cutting up because he's going around and he's a gangbanger for Jesus. He's a gangbanger for Jesus. We got to do something with this Peter. We got to lock him down. So that's what Herod did. He got Peter at the people's request. One thing that will cause people to ask what has become of Peter is if you don't get caught up in the rituals. Listen, I'm talking about this unleavened bread, this feast of unleavened bread. It's found there. It's ironic that Peter's capture was during this time of the ritualistic tradition of unleavened bread. The Feast of Unleavened. It was a smart political move of King Herod's to arrest Peter, check this out, while visitors and onlookers were in town. Right. They celebrated the feast for about a week after the Passover every spring. It was celebrated to remind them of their godly deliverance from Egyptian slavery. And folk do stuff. I'm going to say it like that. Folk do stuff. When they're the crowd. Or they do stuff just to get a crowd.
Come on.
In this feast there is unleavened bread. Listen, there is unleavened bread. Say unleavened bread.
Unleavened bread.
There's bitter herbs and there's lamb. The reason why the reason why the bread was unleavened was because they had to leave Egypt when they had to leave in such a hurry that the yeast didn't have time to properly rise in the bread, thus leaving the bread, check this out, leaving the bread flat, thin, flaky. Listen, they ate and used the bitter herbs. Say bitter herbs. It was a representation of their long, bitter 24 years, if you will, of suffering in Egypt under Pharaoh. And lastly, study yields the fact that they would then kill a lamb to signify the memorial of the first lamb. Say the first lamb. They killed for the very first feast. And I surveyed this fact, Harris, of unleavened bread, bitter herbs, and lamb for the ritualistic tradition of the feast of the unleavened bread. Check this out. I saw the importance of my telling you, Pastor, not to get caught up in church ritualistic traditions. Even I took notice of the order, say the order, in which they prepared the items of the feast. There was bread, bitter herbs, and lamb. I saw nothing wrong with the actual bread. Because we eat that during the community. I saw nothing wrong with the bitter herbs. We cook with it with certain foods. However, say however, I saw everything wrong. I saw everything wrong with the fact that they prepared the lamb leg. Because God is everything. And everything belongs to Him. He's Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. See, I see always we have to have Him first. I don't want you to get your list of menu items out of order, Mount Canaan and Pastor. If you focus on on getting the lamb prepared first in your life, you can avoid this church ever running into the idea of being flat, thin, and flaky. And bitter with ritualistic church traditions that sound good but are not good and sound. Tell your neighbor, don't get caught up in rituals. The second thing, and I'm going to leave you, beware of restriction. That's in verse 4. Verse 4 says, and when he had apprehended him and put him in prison and delivered him to 4 regiments of soldiers to keep him intending after Easter to bring forth to the people, beware of restrictions. They had locked Peter up. And listen to what the restrictions are in the life of the church. Don't you know we have some restrictions in the life of church? In the life of church, we have some church prisons and some church people. And I think it is pretty bad to have restrictions on something that should be free. Amen. What's the use in having a car when you can't drive when you want to? What's the use in buying a house when you can't sleep and eat there when you need to? What's the use in having money when you can't spend it on what you have to spend it on? These are called restrictions, and there shouldn't be any when it comes to the Holy Spirit and God's church. There may be some restrictions if you're operating with a selfish spirit and a church that's ran by man. Listen, what I see here, Peter was in jail behind 16 soldiers. One man needed 16 soldiers. Let us know that he's a force to be reckoned with. And I thought about it in the life of my pastor. I thought about it how all the deacons used to have to gang up when I bring an objective on the table. 10 deacons fighting against one thing God said. Amen. The church has restrictions when there are church prisons. Does your church have prisons? Come on. Is everybody trying to find the latest thing wrong with you? Are people too concerned with your past rather than your future? Do the people fuss about change or do they follow leadership? Can the Holy Spirit come or does he have to get an invitation? I know y'all don't like that. Does the church follow man-made bylaws or does it follow the Bible? I remember preaching at a church, and God Almighty, I accidentally touched the communion table. I just touched the communion table, and boy, they had hissy fits. Because I touched the communion table, and it stood up, the deacon stood up and said, "Where's your pulpit?" Don't you know you touched that communion table? I said, yeah, I touched the communion table. But did your wife touch it to fix it?